Thank you, Lou. It's a pleasure to be with you here today, and let me assure you that while this event is advertised as a retreat, it has been and will continue to be an all-out offensive on the deplorable and irrational policies that govern this nation. My topic, as Lou said, is what thrives and what dies during war. This is a big subject, has many consequences, and it's fortunate that I'm doing the timing here, so I'll have plenty of time to discuss all of them. First, I want to talk about the very nature of war, because that's where all of the consequences and the ill effects of war really can be understood. It has often been claimed that war is good because it brings out the human traits of courage and bravery and patriotism. War makes for exciting times and stretches our endurance and allows us to achieve our destiny. War can even get us out of economic depressions, as some would claim. Nothing could be further from the truth. War is really what animals do to each other. It is deadly and it's destructive. It prevents us from building and achieving our goals and brings man down to the level of the brute animal. It destroys cooperation and trade and substitutes force for peaceful voluntary interaction. Personal and family bonds are broken, while property rights are ignored and trampled upon. Things like tasteful art, literature, music, and culture in general are pushed asunder or replaced with primitive and barbaric substitutes. Police power, economic interventionism, and nationalism thrive. And of course, one of the major themes of this retreat is that inflation makes war possible. War is the health of the state, not the well-being of the community. Now, can the United States be properly labeled a participant in this animalistic and barbaric behavior of total war? Well, no, not really. It would be more correct to say that the United States has been on the cutting edge in adopting the ideology of total war. We were one of its first practitioners, and we are one of the leading developers of its methods. Let me bring your attention to General William Tecumseh Sherman and his fellow Union generals who practiced intentional genocide of total war in the so-called Civil War during the 1860s. He originally developed and perfected his techniques during the Seminole War in Florida years before. His methods in Florida included destroying homes, crops, food stores, poisoning water supplies, killing women and children, all methods the Union Army would continue to use throughout the 19th century. World War I was certainly total war at its worst, and so was World War II. Hitler, Churchill, Roosevelt all condoned continuous and indiscriminate bombing of civilians. Truman authorized the incineration of more than 250,000 civilians, mostly women and children. Now, we can try to argue that these actions were efficient or effective or necessary, but we cannot deny that they were barbaric. Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises showed that the only policy consistent with humanity is peace. He showed that war is the result of interventionism, protectionism, and the welfare state. He further showed us that peace can only be achieved with a consistent ideology and a persistent policy of unlimited laissez-faire. No matter what the statistics say, a nation cannot achieve a higher standard of living while it is at war. I wanted to go down a list of general effects between peace and war that I was thinking about in preparation for this retreat. In peace, we see truth thriving while deceit thrives during war. In peace, we see individual privacy being a concern for the rights of people and not of government, whereas in war, secrecy, particularly of the government and its right to know our private issues, thrives. In peace, knowledge, education, science, and technology thrive. During war, propaganda thrives. And of course, we have, in the current war, we have U.S. radio in Afghanistan putting in the U.S. propaganda into Afghanistan as well as here in the United States. The market thrives during peace. Government thrives during war. Liberty from government thrives during peace. Power of government over the individual thrives during war. In peace, freedom of the individual's right to do things thrives. In war, security thrives. In peace, we see entrepreneurs thriving and becoming important central characters in our society. In war, politicians and their status in society is elevated, as we've seen in recent polling data on the popularity of the president. During peace, citizens thrive. Remember, before the war started, there was all talks about tax cuts and lock boxes and that sort of thing in terms of government. And now, after the war, it's all special interests. We're going to spend money developing new military technology, new government railroads, all for the benefit of special interest groups. During peace, savings thrive. During war, consumption does. During peace, capital survives. During war, depreciation is the key. I'd note that in the period between 1830 and 1860, when the United States was in an extended period of peace and isolation from Europe, capital accumulation in the United States was at its highest consistent level in our history. Of course, during the Civil War, there was a great depreciation. During peace, excellence thrives. During war, ersatz thrives, or trying to get by with poor substitutes. For example, in the Civil War in the South, people used burnt seeds and leaves to brew a substitute for coffee. It wasn't very good, as you can well imagine. During peace, culture thrives. Sound money thrives, where, of course, during war, inflation is the thing that thrives the most. During peace, the family thrives. During war, it dies. You're more likely to see things like family breakups, divorce, as Joe mentioned earlier this morning, more orphans, more delayed marriages, prostitution, and so on. During peace, it's babies that thrive, and the birth rate rises. During war, bombs thrive, and the birth rate falls, and the death rate increases. During peace, our health is what is benefited. People become healthier and live longer. During war, we're more likely to see famine. In the news reports about famine issues around the world, such as in Afghanistan as we speak, famine is usually treated as a lack of rainfall or diseases or some sort of pestilence coming into play. But in actual fact, famine is always and everywhere the result of some sort of severe government intervention in the economy, and it's typically war or civil war. And then finally, during peace, life in general is what thrives, and of course our life expectancy statistics improve during peacetime, but during war, death is what thrives. More people die, fewer people are born, the death rate goes up, infant mortality rates go up, and life expectancy goes down. So the whole general picture for society is very cut and dry between war and peace. In terms of the economy itself, I've divided the economy into 4 different areas, some of which thrive and some of which die. The first branch of the economy I've labeled the Main Street economy. This is our basic land, labor, and capital, and these are all harmed by war. So in our Main Street economy, we have the retail sector, for example, would be in the Main Street economy. Real estate would be in the Main Street economy. the insurance industry, the airline industry, and really all capital-intensive industries, as well as manufacturing and non-defense capital goods, are harmed in general during wars. The second branch of the overall economy is the unregulated economy, or the lightly regulated economy. And in this area of the overall economy, I would put things like technology. Technology which has thrived so much in the 1990s, during the peace of the 1990s, is going to be harmed by war. One example of that would be, of course, the Internet and all of the Internet-related technologies, something that has thrived. More capital has been injected into this area of the economy. It's been relatively unregulated. They've even had bans on taxing the Internet and so on. But now that's starting to change with war, as the government wants the right to be able to snoop into the Internet, possibly to tax and regulate the Internet. So that's something that entrepreneurs are going to be pulling back from. And even if it were to continue to grow as everyone expects, it's not going to grow as far or as fast as otherwise would occur. Other issues in the unregulated economy, banking privacy is going to continue to suffer. And then on the cutting edge of the economy, small businesses and new businesses are going to be hurt by war, either this time or in general. Okay, during war, there's a much diminished tendency to start new businesses. And small businesses tend to be hurt by government programs, because they can't deal with government programs as well as the large established corporations can. Okay, the death economy. The death economy benefits from war. The death economy benefits from the destruction of people, peace, and privacy. The first group in the death economy, I would put the military industries, the companies who are making the bombs and the airplanes that are used in war. And of course, we've seen since September 11th, this is no big surprise to anybody, that the stocks of all of the military companies have done extremely well, and they've gotten new contracts. A lot of the limitations that have been put on the development of new weapons and the construction of older weapons has now all been pushed aside, and everything is basically an open floodgate as the money is pouring into the military industries. A question was asked this morning about where does the new money go? Well, it's the new money that's being created now is in large part going into the military and the companies that make weapons. Spies, all of the various spy agencies are thriving. Their budgets have been greatly enhanced, and they're recruiting for new members, and they're all doing extremely well. As a matter of fact, I ran into somebody who worked for the FBI and was thinking about retiring, but after Bush was elected president, he decided to delay his retirement. He said, "We're back in business." And so some of the people in the spy industry knew that the Bush administration was more pro-war. Of course, the government in general benefits, and we also tend to see new taxes. And finally, the final member of the death economy is the news media, because they, of course, are also major beneficiaries of death. Their ratings go up, and their advertising goes up. They love that kind of thing. Now, this is really, the 9/11 disaster has really turned out to be a perfect war for government. While the battle against Osama bin Laden seems like a small war, it's actually the perfect war for government. It's in a very faraway place, not easily accessible by the people or the news media. The opposition in this case is small and poorly equipped, so they don't represent much of a threat. And they are also spread out all over the world, so great quantities of resources can be used up chasing them down in the many countries around the globe. It's even their clothing, I think, makes them look and mean-looking, and I think that helps the cause of government. The White House recently announced that they expect the war to last 6 years. So it's also going to be a long war, maybe never end. It's also perfect in the sense that the terrorists hit the American homeland and killed innocent citizens. This provides a perfect rationale for all sorts of government interventions and new powers while also producing the support and patriotism necessary to extract the resources and also to subvert a whole host of liberties and freedoms. To top it all off, the timing of the war was excellent because the economy had sunk so far into recession that even government statistics revealed the truth. Nothing trumps a recession like a good war, and the popularity ratings of President Bush are a testament to that, and also the whole notion of belief in government. The polling data on that has also turned around. So the whole thing is really turned out to be a perfect war for government. Now, unfortunately, war has a lasting effect, both in terms of what thrives and in terms of what dies. In terms of what thrives, government itself, of course, is the major beneficiary. And Robert Higgs has pointed out in his book, Crisis and Leviathan, exactly what happens during such a crisis. It can be either a war or a significant economic event like the Great Depression. But basically, Higgs shows that crises create a ratchet effect on the size of government. So that as government is growing over time, it's growing very slowly. That's peacetime growth. And then a crisis will cause it to grow very significantly over a short period of time, remain stable for the rest of the crises, and then after the crisis is over, to retract. But not to retract back to the previous level, but to stay up at this level and then start growing again until another crisis comes along and another ratchet upward. The New York Times understands Higgs' connection between war and big government, and it makes them very happy. They ask, is it really guns versus butter? Do we really get fewer social programs when government spends more on defense? No, they say, we can have both when it comes to government and war. And then they go about explaining how war has actually increased military spending and social spending, and that spending has remained in place after the war was over. They are still concerned, however, that there are significant barriers to starting new domestic programs during this war, but they conclude with confidence because recent polling data shows that public trust in government has reversed itself from a 30-year slide, and that the airport security bill was already passed, which they dubbed, quote, a major public works program, and which also enlarged the federal workforce and, quote, even included a tax increase called a passenger fee. The New York Times concludes, almost drunk with joy, that given the nature of this war, it would be possible to start new programs for medical research, healthcare, food safety, computer technology, law enforcement, unemployment insurance, transportation, energy, education, the list goes on and on. And, quote, from New York Times, while the programs would have been launched under the banner of military effort, they could create a permanent government presence in areas unimaginable September 10th, 2001. Now, some of the, there's already a lot of tangible increases in government. The Office of Homeland Security, which is a new bureaucracy, nobody in Washington questioned its establishment. It's small right now, but it's sure to grow over time. One estimate put it at $1.5 trillion over the next few years. And I'd also draw your attention to an article in the Free Market by Bob Higgs, where he discusses this new Office of Homeland Security, and he asks poignantly, what about the massive Department of Defense? If it does not defend our homeland, what does it defend? Well, basically, the Defense Department has admitted its complete and utter inability to defend this nation. This admission, however, is only going to serve as a perfect setting for Bush's missile shield program to get a high priority on the federal to-do list. A couple of specific things that go wrong in society as a result of war. The first one I want to bring your attention to is social problems. War is the great fount of social problems. Countless people, both soldiers and civilians, are broken mentally, physically, and financially as a result of war. After many of our wars, Civil War, World War I, II, Korea, and Vietnam, many of the soldiers were left addicted to drugs and alcohol. Of course, they're put into veterans' mental health facilities for the rest of their lives in many cases. In World War II and Korea War did the same. And we see all of these social problems of drug use and prostitutions and broken families. These all, of course, cost money, but the human cost is incalculable. And, of course, soldiers don't have to go to war to cause these social problems. Just go to any military base and you will see it surrounded by prostitutes, drug dealers, seedy bars and hotels, not to mention a plethora of tattoo parlors and pawn shops. Technology. Very often, if you see shows about wars, they talk about new technology and new weapons being used. But the general effect of war is to stall technology in its tracks. In the book on the Civil War that I'm working on, I've investigated the improvement in technology that might have resulted in the United States because of the Civil War. All the experts agree that basically there was no improvement in technology during a 5-year period. There was simply a halt to new technological developments in terms of research, labs, education, engineering, and so forth. And there was also a sort of a lull in technology after the war because many of the best engineers and scientists were killed during the war itself. And finally, a third category that I wanted to add, and that is culture and the case of poetry. I just happened to be reviewing my paper here a couple days ago, and I saw on the shelf of my library the Oxford Book of American Verse. And I picked it up. It's a book of poetry, a sort of a general collection of the great American poets, most of whom were born in the late 18th and early 19th century. And I was just looking at the dates of when they were born and when they lived. There was no poet in the book that was born in the Civil War decade until 1869. I believe that the death and destruction of that war reduced the population in such a way that it simply did not provide the opportunity for that generation to contribute much in cultural areas like poetry. In fact, there is a large gap between the birth of Emily Dickinson in 1830 and Edgar Lee Masters in 1869, filled only by the birth of Sidney Lanier, who I don't know, in 1842. I believe that this large gap in time is explained in large part by the fact that so many people were killed during the Civil War, and the spirits of so many more were killed in the process, and left the remainder of society with a tremendous burden to carry. In fact, I also went on to consult a list of modern American poets born in the 19th and 20th century, and after looking up the first 200 of them, I found that only 7 were born during war years. All 7 were female. And on average, if we had spread the 200 poets out over the entire period, there would have been approximately 25 to 30 poets born during the war. So the greatly reduced number, and the fact that they were all female tells me that when war occurs and there's massive death and destruction, that really creates a cultural hole in society, in time, not often noticed, but nonetheless tangible. To sum up, what thrives during war? It's government, it's inflation, and it's kind of bad human behavior. What dies during war is our economy, our culture, and our standard of living. In terms of investment, it's hard to get a clear picture on what this war has for us on the investment horizon, especially given that the business cycle is being mixed in with this war. Gold is obviously something that would naturally be considered given history. And also, one of the things that I've seen on the news a lot, financial news a lot, last couple of weeks has been the January effect, where if in the first 5 days the stock market is up, then the chances of the stock market going up for the year are supposed to be extremely high. And those chances are enhanced even more if the stock market is up for the entire month of January. As a matter of fact, the January effect is held in almost every year for the last 50 years. There were only 4 exceptions, and 3 of those 4 exceptions were war years. So war really does does change things, even though it's separate and distinct from the business cycle. Ultimately, it does matter to the economy. Thank you very much.
I've got one piece of evidence to that. In Chicago, there wasn't a single hotel built or new office building, large office building, hotel built until the 1950s. I'm wondering if you have supporting data or other things.
Well, the fact that there wasn't a hotel built for more than 5 years after the war in Chicago gives you some idea about the lasting impact on our real standard of living. The issue of did the World War II get us out of the Great Depression was really settled, I think, by Robert Higgs, in an article in the Journal of Economic History back in 1992, and he actually opens the article with a quote from Ludwig von Mises. And basically what Higgs showed was that the level of consumption by Americans during World War II was actually a little bit lower than the level of consumption during the Great Depression, so that Americans, in their ability to consume, were actually worse off during the Great Depression. And so he argues that World War II did not get us out of the Great Depression, and that it was the ending of the war that actually got us out of the 15-year depression.
Would you get me a copy of that article?
I sure can. And I actually was very interested in that subject for a number of years. And I actually did some sophisticated econometrics on the stock market during that period. And what I found out, and this is the only known case that I know of, is that on the day that Roosevelt's death was reported, the stock market actually started a rebound that it hadn't experienced for over 15 years, really. And it's so you could think of Roosevelt's death as getting us out of the Great Depression, not what he did in terms of policies. Yes.
How would you respond to the claim that the war economy helped us get the internet and comic and things like that? You have people claim that good things come out of a war economy.
Well, there are a few things that that do come out of these massive government programs. In terms of beating the Russians to the moon, we didn't get much out of that at all, but we did get Tang. Supplement, vitamin C supplement. But there are a few things that relate it. Now, atomic energy, of course, would have been developed anyways. It's really an alternative fuel. It doesn't have any. It has very limited superior uses where existing fuel could be used in a better way. But also, you have the simple fact that the government is using massive amounts of resources in these projects. So you have to think in terms of what was the alternative use of all those resources. Sure, you might generate a few seeds of technology or innovation, but the overall impact is very, very limited, I would say.
Yeah, what is seen and not seen, right?
Dr. Thornton, I'm finishing up my initial commitment as an officer, a junior officer now. Well, actually, with this war, they put a stop loss in place to keep people from getting out. Hopefully that lifts. Hopefully that lifts in the next couple of months if I can. But a couple things they do, just to give you an idea of the mentality of the senior leadership and the typical junior officer in the military today. Like to his question, they're constantly spreading propaganda that these sorts of projects are what really is the backbone of the American economy. One general came by to talk to us about retention issues and said that the American military deserves the credit for the great economy of the past 5 years because we've captured the world, kept them in line. They also they use it's just the mentality that these people are too stupid to invest their stuff in technology that would work unless we did it for them. Mm-hmm. And they really buy that, so they really are socialists. They may pass themselves off as cultural conservatives, but they're socialists in their thinking. They're bureaucrats. But the effect morally, because you're talking about the moral effect, especially on younger people, is the thing that's detrimental. Because people talk about bringing out courage or that sort of thing. Certainly, difficult trying situations bring out the courage in individual people. There's also tend to be the individual people that will stand up for something when everyone else is going along the party line. And that is exactly what they kill from the very beginning. They talk about excellence, but from the very beginning, like for instance at the Air Force Academy, they kill any sense of individual responsibility.
That's right, because you have to be...
They kill it outright and say, if you, whatever happens, if your so-and-so messes up, then it's on your head. But the thing that they inject that makes it even worse is that people tend to stop their moral reasoning at the level that they can justify. They find a level of moral justification for their lives, and then anything beyond that, they can live however they want. And what the military does, especially among younger people, is it says, what you're doing is you're serving your country and you're being selfless, and therefore you're a good person no matter what else you do with yourself and your time. And it really promotes a hedonistic, nihilistic perspective towards other things. Yet they still retain the pride that tells them that they're self-righteous in their actions.
Well, everybody's got to have a party line, and there's a good deal of, for lack of a better term, brainwashing to get a unit to serve under such difficult circumstances. It's not surprising that all armies have done that, except for mercenary armies, all the way back in time.
And democracy makes it worse because it gives you this abstraction that you're supposedly supporting. You're not, taking an oath to Hitler, you're taking an oath to this document, this way of life. One
of the things I was thinking of, sort of connecting the earlier point and what Gene was talking about in terms of mathematics, was the recent movie, The Beautiful Mind, that came out where you have all these mathematicians and these modelers and decipherers and stuff, the greatest minds in American society. And what's the whole show about is bringing these, the most capable minds in society and putting them into these military spy-type think tanks. And, of course, what was actually going on, even though, what's his name, Nash was given the most prestigious position in one of these institutes, he gets there and is bored to tears. Basically doesn't have anything to do. He and his staff of leading mathematicians are not really doing very much. Of course, ultimately, a few of them did make, deciphering codes and that sort of thing very successful. But, in total, you have a massive mental capital investment on the part of the military, taking that out of the private sector and bringing it into the public sector, and seeing very little productivity come about as a result.
Jim, I got a question to you about the financial models we have. It's quite interesting, but I found it a bit puzzling. Like, if you guys have to adjust each time there's some particular change, why do you have those models at all? I mean, what's the point? I mean, if things are following a particular trend line, then you don't need any models. I mean, like in the bull market, I remember there was a lady who stood extremely well and asked her, what's the principle? She was listening to the barking of the dog. If the dog would bark twice, she would buy. If it barked once, she would sell. She was doing extremely well. Yeah? It's simple. The trend is upwards. It doesn't matter what you do. You're just doing well, right? And so if you have a model, all of a sudden things are changing and you're sort of gauging this and you change the model, stop the model, why to have it? Why bother? I mean, it's just conning yourself.
What I'd say is that the model can, you have to develop a model robust enough to withstand minor changes in interpretation in the market. When I say they stop it and change it, often in a day, the model may run all day trading the deal for all the traders and never be stopped. Working on this, I had said that, the model you have to change the model when you get a major change in reinterpretation. I stopped and thought, well, what's major? Well, major is how much margin does your model give you? These people are looking for 3 cents a share, and, it's only an interpretation that's going to throw things off by more than that makes them stop the model. What they get out of it is, and they're not looking at a trend, Apple and Sun are gone. But, they're not picking market direction or anything. They're just looking for stocks coming out of a set parameter. There's a whole bunch of things they feed into it. The details of the model are very proprietary, but what they get to do is they can let the computer trade all day, most days for them. And as I said, they've done this for years and churned out this 3 cents a share for a number of years doing it.
Is this the same model each year?
No, they keep developing it. They keep developing it. But what they're not doing, no trader is sitting there going, now I think I buy Sun. Now I think I sell Apple. It's only when it looks to the trader, and that's why I say it's not an elimination of entrepreneurial judgment. When it looks to the trader as though the model, something is not fitting with it, they stop it, think about it, perhaps input new parameters. They keep evolving it when they keep analyzing the P&L over all the mergers they're doing and keep evolving it. But yes.
It sounds to me, from especially your explanation about mergers, that a lot of people do that on a fundamental basis without using the computer. They're looking for a bigger chunk. You're using a computer to try to get those little chunks.
Yeah, without the computerization, the tiny increments we're looking to pick up would be, we couldn't do it so fast and so frequently during the day. We couldn't keep picking up those 3 cents all day long.
It sounds like it's very different from what long-term capital management did, where they seem to be aspiring to sort of find the model that would explain the whole world and sort of make money forever. Wasn't that your sense of the culture of that place?
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with them, but yeah, and I think they got unhedged too. I think they wound up seriously unhedged. One thing we try to do is always be market neutral. That Enron 102,000 shares was, purely a computer bug. We are never net long or net short. We're always looking to buy and sell at the same time.
But long-term capital at the beginning was just like this firm.
Okay.
They were just arguing the difference between a cash security and a future security in the bond market. Bond market arbitrage. It's very, very similar, just looking for tiny incremental change and doing it on a levered basis.
I think one thing that happened was they kept getting capital and they didn't have enough of that to invest in. So they started going out into riskier and riskier things. These people keep returning capital to the partners because they only want the amount of capital that they see they can do this arbitrage with.
Are the results audited by anybody?
Um,
Can we get a copy maybe?
It's a private firm.
Well, that's the advantage of being private firm. They can say anything to you they want.
Well, but they have to give me my return on the capital. Now it could be that they're giving me that and they didn't really make it. They just like me. But I don't.
People in this kind of work say all kinds of things all day long. I've learned. So.
Sure, but as I said, the cash is there at the end of the year.
At the end of the day, it's just like a guy who developed a way to beat the roulette table by a penny at a time. That's not the investment process. There's nothing entrepreneurial about it. I don't see it.
Yes. This question is for you, Mark. Apart from all the bad things that you said that happened during war, what do you think about this theory about blowbacks or unintended consequences?
Well, war certainly has a lot of unintended consequences. It results in new entangling alliances. It results, of course, even for the victor in a war, that you're going to be long-term involved in the affairs of other countries, that sort of thing. I'm not sure exactly what the area of unintended consequences you're referring to, because there's so many domestic, economic, personal liberties. The list is really endless. Is there a specific area that you were thinking about?
Well, there was one mention, I think that came by someone from the CIA, and saying like the things that are happening. I mean, this person in particular mentions that when there was the overthrow of the Shah of Iran, that the new power that came was actually even worse than overthrowing this regime. So.
And the same thing could be said about Afghanistan itself, where you had a fairly neutral regime replaced by the Russians, and then we're in there covertly supporting the Mujahideen and the groups like Bin Laden's people were part of, and so it does seem to always get worse over time when you start involving yourself covertly in these regimes. And a lot of that stuff has come home to roost, and it just seems to get worse. The Iran case is certainly it's been that way for quite a long time, and of course Afghanistan is really a very unfortunate circumstance. Short-term gain for a very long-term loss.
Is it true that big financial institutions throughout history have provoked two different groups to cause a war so they can finance it and make money? Is that the deal?
Well, big financial firms are definitely involved in here. As a matter of fact, I think I forgot to put the fourth economy up there, which is the devil economy, and the financing and the big banks, that sort of thing were in that component of the economy. The devils, the group of devils, they're the ones that do benefit from the war. Of course, you're making munitions, you have to finance the war, you have to finance the debt, and all of that is a big money-making process. And so in every war in the United States and in most other places, the Revolutionary War, Spanish-American War, certainly the Civil War on the northern side, World War I and II, they all resulted in big gains for the people who were helping the government finance the war itself. And so to the extent that they're in there provoking the war. I'm not really familiar with a lot of that, but they certainly end up benefiting from it as a result. Questions over here?
Yeah, Gene, I found the Mises quote really fascinating about entrepreneurial profit. Is he basically saying that the entrepreneurial profit, whether it be to entrepreneurs or investors, goes to the contrarian?
Well, if everyone already knows that the changed circumstances are going to increase the demand for wheat, the price for wheat will already be at the final level that reflects that change. So, he's in several places in Human Action, he says it's people who first understand, the people who earliest understand what the impact of some change will be, correctly understand it, will be the ones who get entrepreneurial profits.
Is there also a lesson here for the Austrian Economics movement that if all the mainstream economists basically agree with us, that we ought to just sort of keep a low profile, and if they're all saying the same thing and they totally disagree with us, should we be shouting from the rooftops?
Well, bringing market thinking to intellectual truth is, it doesn't map one to one. I think you try to say the truth, whatever you think it is. There's been some back and forth in the journals on, has Austrian Economics passed the market test, or has it failed the market test? That's a misapplication, to me. You can't bring market thinking into this search for intellectual truth. The A squared plus B squared equals C squared, even if most investors don't think so, right?
I'm just wondering whether you're a pacifist or what wars in American history do you think could have been avoided, if any?
What wars could have been avoided?
Well, recently, yeah. I'm just saying, of course, the Civil War, if both sides decided not to do it, it wouldn't happen. But that's not what I'm talking about. We could have decided at the end of World War I or something. I'm just wondering if you're not making that kind of argument, are you?
No, I haven't. I would say our involvement in I'm not sure where to start. In modern times, we go backward, or start back and go forward. The Mexican-American War, the Spanish-American War, World War I and II, Korea, Vietnam, the current crisis. The Civil War is a tough one.
You're saying these other wars we should have not entered?
Yes, I would say that they could have been avoided, yes.
Could have been avoided is different than saying we should not have entered it.
That's right, but he has...
How could you avoid World War II?
How could you have avoided it?
Stay out of World War I. Not getting into World War I.
Yeah, stay out of World War I. That's a good start.
No, but it's a hindsight kind of view of history, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but just a few minor things. If somebody had done something right before Pearl Harbor, we could have avoided that.
My point, Marshall, what you said is that, I understand that the United States foreign policy has oftentimes been aggressive and arrogant, having people stationed in 140 countries around the world. I view that a little bit excessive. But on the other hand, once someone attacks you at your home base, and once you realize someone who attacks you is an irrational human being, how are you going to get, you have to do something.
That's right.
Now, you're telling me what we're doing wrong, but you're not saying what we should have done instead. Having a national homeland security, expanding the government, perhaps it's a little bit difficult, but what else could you have done under the same circumstances? That's my point. Dr. Hoppe says maybe we can get AIG and Prudential to send out mercenaries. But that's totally unrealistic and fairly idiotic, really.
Well, I think that the issues like Pearl Harbor and the trade towers, when I say they could have been avoided, what I'm thinking of most directly is the fact that in both cases, if one person or one federal agency or branch of the military out of a couple of dozen in both cases had done a decent job, those things could have been avoided. And so they could have been avoided in that sense. I mean, in both cases, there's a sort of...
But when something happens,
systemic,
what do you do?
Well, I'm not much on in terms of...
How do you provide security for so many airports and so many places when you're dealing with an enemy you can't even pinpoint? Think of
Joe is...
When anything happens, like the World Trade Tower attack, I mean, that was a criminal action. You allow the criminal justice to take care of it, and then you permit private property owners, the owner, privatize the airport, but allow the airlines, which are already private, to take steps to protect their passengers. Okay? If they don't do that, then they're going to lose money and go out of business. Or if they do too much of it and become too vexatious, and they take their shoes off and steal your screwdriver to your eyelets, which they did to me, then you don't go to that one either. You have competition. I don't know. What do you do? I mean, you allow the private property owners who are threatened to respond. And then you protect the borders of the homeland.
And number one, the airports are not private property.
Yeah, they should.
And they should.
Well, there's what I was responding to in the question was that if we had a lot of those things, as well as just any sort of compliance with what these people were supposed to be doing at the time, and it's only in hindsight that we go back and look at this sort of systemic incompetence, but those things could have very easily been avoided entirely. Not to say that would have solved the problem, but there are, as Joe suggested, other ways of addressing those issues.
Well, the big question is, why do they want to do it to us? That's because we're meddling. They're taking out their revenge on us because they feel like we're meddling in their affairs. And that they feel completely justified in what they're doing. Now, we don't feel justified, but most people in this country don't understand how much the United States is meddling in everybody's affairs. We got our nose in, like the gentleman said, 140, 150 different countries. And as soon as you put troops in there, one group's going to love you, and the other group ain't going to like you. And they're going to have people get hurt, they're going to get killed, and they're going to have revenge on their mind.
Yeah, it's important. In economics, is always talked about rationality, and and Americans looking at these other groups who may be attacking us or doing strange things in their own country. We don't see them as being rational from our perspective. You have to look at it issues and events from the people you're actually judging.
It's not they're not irrational human beings, as the gentleman said. That's not the issue. And with Saudi, if the U.S. government, you can't use something that has happened. He said that we're looking at history with hindsight. History is hindsight. It's hindsight all the way back. And you have to look before and ask what caused it. Plus, a single event cannot be used as a trump card to justify anyone's program. What happened with the trade tower cannot be used to justify the entire neocon program, which includes, if they were serious, they'd pull out of Saudi Arabia for two huge reasons. A, the oil interests, or the two huge reasons they don't, the oil interests that are involved, where Rothbard documented this in his essays for the Rothbard report. And the second thing that the Saudi Arabian government does, plays a critical role besides having us protect their own interests, is they promote the very brand of Islamic fundamentalism that doesn't. And but no one has ever even mentioned within the circles that possibility. So the motive of the people in power who we're implicitly giving, who many people are implicitly giving their assent to, is entirely different than actually protecting the life and property of the people of the United States. That's not their motive. So you can't assign them that motive after the fact. So if we get something bad happen, they still must be called to the carpet.
Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah. Maybe this question is too big. It seems like the papers are filled with every day with another con job being exposed, like the Enron situation, Argentina, and these are always sort of a big shock to people, after the fact. In the case of Argentina, I think it's listed, very high in the index of economic freedom, and you remember this? And Forbes magazine had article after article about the glorious currency system. And I guess Enron got very good press. what are the things that you look for to sort of spot the frauds that are out there? How do you sort of anticipate these things? What are the telltale signs?
The most telltale sign is it's too good to be true. And if you lived in Houston and you knew people who worked for Enron and you were actually looking at the company, because one of the things, the company was suppressing any bad news and promoting all of the good news. So it really did appear to everyone that things were too good to be true if you really looked at it. The CEO had a beach home in Galveston and liked it so much he built 2 more on either side. And even though he only goes down there a few weekends out of the year, he has a butler there who's making $140,000 a year. I mean, you see things like that and you think, but
I don't think
watch out.
I don't think it's the only thing. To answer your question, I think if you look at a company's financial statements, to the extent that there's some opaqueness in there, or there are more questions than answers, it's time to close it up and pick up another one.
I think an interesting question is where you can't look, which is oftentimes you can't look to Wall Street research, which doesn't often expose a lot of this financial economy because there's a real moral hazard there. They're not incentivized to expose these frauds right now.
The Cisco fraud, for example, or what may come in the future as a JP Morgan Chase thing, you know.
That's how it was.
No one's expecting it, but it will come.
Well, when you see somebody put their name on a new stadium, that's all you need.
To come back to Tony's earlier point, one thing is the trading inside this company is all completely open. It's up on the internet inside the company as it happens, and it's all computer generated. And so it's not a possibility that someone is, hand finagling these things. Yeah.
I didn't suggest that.
Yeah.
But also you have like 60% on partners' capital can be nothing because you can borrow so much money now.
Oh, they're very leveraged. They're very leveraged. Absolutely.
$100 of the capital, you can do a whole lot of things nowadays.
Yeah. 85.
I don't think that's the investment process. I think the investment process requires just a big nose, some common sense, and ability to refinance too.
Yeah, well, there's different kinds of ways to make money in the market. If your puzzle is what economic role they're playing, they're finding mispricings. Are you familiar with...
The bookie in Las Vegas, who has developed a system at the roulette table, obviously then has some economic role as well. I don't see a distinction between the two.
Well, you're familiar with reversals and conversions in the option market?
Sure.
Yeah, they find them all the time. And when you find a reversal and conversion, you have 2 securities that are not priced correctly. And they're able to discover them all day long and just pick up money. But the activity that they do corrects the mispricing because they're buying the underpriced security and selling the overpriced one. So the market would not stay roughly rational unless someone was busy looking for the mispricings and correcting them.
Gene, how did when the government forced the exchange to go from fractions to pennies, did that have any effect on your business?
Pricing became somewhat more, there tighter margins. That may also have something to do with the drop in return last year. Yeah, definitely. There was some programs, in fact, we abandoned due to that.
Gene, what's the possibility that this will be declared unfair? There seems to be some pretty good profits in it, and this is exactly the kind of thing the government would like to call unfair or something like that, and put an end to it.
Geez, I haven't heard about anything developing in that way, and they don't seek any publicity. They're private. They just mind their business and churn out. The profit margins sound fantastic, but as Tony points out, they're trading on a good bit of margin, and it's a lot of it is the fact that they've been at it for years. They're good at it. A lot of it is really their wages, because they know what they're doing so well. You know, a lot of what looks like return on capital is really wages on their labor. So I don't see anything on the horizon.